The knife clattered against Kaden Jamison's plate as the orc woman's teeth sank into the side of his neck. Not hard enough to draw blood, but firm enough that every person in the great hall fell silent and turned to stare. Kaden had been mid-bite of roasted venison when it happened, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth as he felt the pressure of her tusks against his skin, the warmth of her breath, the unmistakable claim she was making in front of 200 witnesses from both human and orc settlements. His heart hammered in his chest, not from fear but from something far more complicated, something that had been building for months now, ever since she had walked into his life with those fierce amber eyes and that stubborn set to her jaw. The orc woman pulled back slowly, deliberately, her green lips curving into something that was not quite a smile but held triumph nonetheless. She straightened to her full height, which was impressive even by orc standards, her muscular frame draped in the ceremonial leathers she had worn for this peace feast. Her dark hair was braided with copper beads that caught the firelight, and her pointed ears were adorned with small silver rings. The tusks that protruded from her lower jaw were polished ivory, smaller than a male orc's but still prominent, still beautiful in their way. "Now everyone knows," she said, her voice carrying across the sudden hush. Her accent was thick, her common still heavily influenced by the guttural tones of orcish, but every word was clear. "Kaden Jamison is claimed by Grasha Stoneheart. Any who challenge this claim, challenge me." Kaden finally found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Grasha, what are you doing?" "What I should have done weeks ago," she replied, those amber eyes fixed on his face with an intensity that made his stomach flip. "You are too cautious, too worried about what others think, so I make it simple. You are mine, I am yours. This is how it is done among my people." The hall erupted into chaos. Human voices raised in shock and outrage, orc voices rumbling with what might have been approval or might have been challenge. Kaden could not tell which. Lord Herrick, the human noble who had organized this feast to celebrate the newly signed peace treaty between the frontier settlements and the orc clans, stood from his seat at the high table, his face purple with indignation. "This is an outrage," Lord Herrick bellowed. "An assault upon a human citizen at a diplomatic gathering. Guards, seize that creature." Grasha did not flinch. She simply shifted her stance, her hand moving to the axe at her belt, and Kaden felt something snap inside him. He pushed back from the table and stood, placing himself between Grasha and the guards who had started forward at their lord's command. "No," Kaden said firmly. "She has not assaulted me. This is an orc custom, a claiming bite. It is not an attack." "You cannot possibly consent to this barbarism," Lord Herrick sputtered. "She is an orc, boy. They are monsters, savages, barely civilized. This peace treaty is meant to keep them away from our people, not encourage them to mate with us." The word mate hung in the air like smoke, and Kaden felt his face flush hot. He was 32 years old, hardly a boy, but Lord Herrick had always treated him as such despite the fact that Kaden owned and worked his own farm on the frontier, despite the fact that he had survived alone out there for 7 years through orc raids and harsh winters, and everything else the wilderness could throw at him. "I am not your subject, Lord Herrick," Kaden said, keeping his voice level with effort. "My farm lies beyond your lands in the free territories, and Grasha Stoneheart is not a savage. She is a warrior, a hunter, and a better person than most humans I have met." Grasha made a sound behind him, something between a growl and a purr that he had learned meant she was pleased. It sent an involuntary shiver down his spine, especially given that her scent still lingered on him, that mixture of wood smoke and leather and something wild that was uniquely hers. The orc chieftain, a massive male named Thrak Ironjaw, rose from his seat at the opposite end of the hall. His scarred face was unreadable, his great axe strapped across his back glinting in the firelight. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stones, deep and rough. "My daughter has claimed a mate by our law," Thrax said. "This is her right as a warrior who has proven herself in battle. If the human accepts her claim, there is no dishonor in it. If he refuses, she must accept his refusal. But no outsider may interfere in this matter. That is our way." Kaden turned to look at Grasha, really look at her, and saw the vulnerability hidden beneath her fierce expression. Her jaw was set in that stubborn way he knew so well, but her eyes held something almost desperate, as if she expected him to reject her publicly, to humiliate her in front of both their peoples. How had they come to this moment? How had a chance encounter in the forest 6 months ago led to this claiming bite in front of everyone they knew? The memories flooded back as he stood there in the sudden silence, every eye in the hall watching to see what he would do. It had been late autumn when Grasha had stumbled into his life, literally stumbled, because she had been bleeding from a dozen wounds and barely conscious when she collapsed against his barn door. Kaden had been feeding his chickens in the early morning light when he heard the thud and found her there. A young orc woman covered in blood and mud, her breathing shallow. His first instinct had been fear. Orcs were the enemy, the raiders who burned farms and killed settlers. The monster's parents used to frighten children into obedience. But when he looked at her face, slack with unconsciousness, he saw only a person in desperate need of help. He had dragged her inside his cabin, struggling with her weight, because she was solid muscle and stood a good 6 inches taller than his own 6 feet. He had cleaned her wounds, stitched the worst of them with the same careful precision he used to mend torn clothing or broken tools. He had covered her with his best blanket and left water and strips of dried meat within reach for when she woke. Then he had sat in his chair by the fire, his hunting bow across his knees, and waited to see if she would try to kill him when she regained consciousness. She had not woken until dusk. He had watched her eyes open slowly, watched them take in the unfamiliar surroundings, watched her hand move instinctively toward the weapon that was no longer at her belt. He had laid her axe and knife on the table across the room, far enough that she could not reach them quickly but close enough that she could see he had not destroyed them. "You are safe here," Kaden had said quietly in common, hoping she understood the language. "I found you injured at my door. I have tended your wounds. When you are strong enough to leave, you may go. I will not stop you." Grasha had stared at him for a long moment, her amber eyes wary and confused. Then she had tried to sit up, gasped in pain, and fallen back against the pillows. "Why?" she had asked, her common heavily accented but understandable. "Why help Orc?" "Because you were dying," Kaden had replied simply. "I am a farmer, not a soldier. I will not kill someone who poses no threat to me. I am Orc," she had said, as if that explained everything. "We are threat. Always threat." "Are you threatening me right now?" Kaden had asked. She had blinked at that, then slowly shaken her head. "No, too weak. And you help me. Orc law says I owe life debt." "I do not want a debt," Kaden had told her. "I want you to heal and then you can return to your people." But it had not been that simple. Her injuries had been severe, deep slashes from what looked like sword wounds and puncture marks that might have been from spears. Whatever had happened to her, she had barely escaped with her life. For 3 days, she had drifted in and out of fever while Kaden tended to her, changing bandages, forcing water and broth between her lips, cooling her burning skin with damp cloths. During her delirium, she had spoken in Orcish, words Kaden could not understand but which sounded like pleas and curses and cries of pain. He had held her hand when the fever dreams grew too intense, and she had gripped his fingers with desperate strength, as if he were an anchor keeping her from drowning in darkness. When the fever finally broke on the fourth day, she had opened her eyes to find him dozing in the chair beside the bed, exhausted from days of barely sleeping. She had watched him for a long time before speaking, or so she told him later, studying his face as if trying to understand what kind of human would save an orc's life. "I am Grasha," she had said, and her voice had been stronger than before. Grasha Stoneheart, daughter of Thrak Ironjaw, warrior of the Stoneheart clan. Kaden had jerked awake, nearly falling out of his chair. "I am Kaden Jamison. I own this farm." "Kaden," she had repeated, testing the name. "You have saved my life, Kaden Jamison. This is not a small thing. Among my people, I now owe you blood debt. I must remain until I can repay this debt, or my honor is worthless." "That is not necessary," Kaden had insisted, but he had already been learning that when Grasha Stoneheart decided something, it was nearly impossible to change her mind. She had stayed. Even after her wounds healed enough for her to move around the cabin, even after she could have easily left and returned to her clan, she had stayed. She had insisted on helping with the farm work, on earning her keep while she repaid what she called her debt to him. At first, Kaden had been wary, waiting for the moment she would reveal herself to be an enemy, a threat, the monster he had been taught to fear. But that moment never came. Instead, he watched her feed his chickens with surprising gentleness, careful not to startle them with her sighs. He watched her repair his barn roof with skill that spoke of experience, her strong hands moving with precision as she fitted new boards into place. He watched her chop firewood with her recovered axe, her muscles rippling under her green skin, and tried not to notice how graceful she was despite her size and strength. They had fallen into a routine of sorts. She would wake before dawn and check the perimeter of the farm for threats, moving silently through the forest despite her bulk. He would make breakfast, simple fare of porridge and bread and whatever eggs the chickens had provided. They would work through the day, sometimes together and sometimes separately, on the endless tasks that came with maintaining a frontier farm. In the evenings they would sit by the fire, and slowly, hesitantly, they had begun to talk. Grasha had told him about her clan, about growing up as the chieftain's daughter with expectations weighing on her like stone. She had told him about learning to fight, about proving herself against male warriors twice her size, about earning her place through strength and skill rather than birth. She had told him about the raid that had injured her, a clash with a different human settlement farther north, one that had not been interested in peace. Her own warriors had been forced to retreat, and she had been separated from them, hunted through the forest for days before finally collapsing at his door. Kaden had told her about his own life, about growing up in a crowded town where he never quite fit in, always too quiet, too bookish, too interested in plants and animals rather than swords and glory. He had told her about inheriting a small sum from his grandfather and using it to buy this land, about the dream of building something of his own, away from the expectations and judgments of others. He had told her about the loneliness of the frontier, about going months without seeing another human face, about talking to his chickens because there was no one else to talk to. "That is why you saved me," Grasha had said one evening, her amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "You are lonely. You wanted someone to talk to, even if that someone is orc." "Maybe," Kaden had admitted, "but I like to think I would have saved you regardless. It is the right thing to do." "Right and wrong are different for orcs and humans," Grasha had said quietly. "Humans see orcs as monsters who attack without reason. Orcs see humans as invaders who take land that does not belong to them. Both believe they are right. Both believe the other is evil." "What do you believe?" Kaden had asked. She had been quiet for a long time before answering. I believe that you are a good man, Kaden Jamison. I believe that I have been taught many things about humans that may not be true. I believe that I am confused, and that confuses me even more because I am not supposed to be confused. I am supposed to know who my enemies are. Am I your enemy? Kaden had asked, his heart beating faster than it should. No, Grasha had said firmly. You are not my enemy. I do not know what you are, but you are not that. The weeks had passed, autumn fading toward winter, and Grasha had not left. She had helped him prepare the farm for the cold months, helped him hunt and smoke meat, helped him reinforce the cabin against the coming snows. She had told him she could not return to her clan yet, that she needed to be certain she had repaid her debt, but they both knew that was becoming an excuse. The truth was that neither of them wanted her to leave. Kaden had begun to notice things he should not notice. The way her laugh sounded when he said something that surprised her, a deep, rumbling sound that made him want to hear it again. The way she moved, all controlled power and fluid grace despite her size. The way she looked at him sometimes when she thought he was not paying attention, with an expression he could not quite read, but which made something warm unfold in his chest. He had tried to ignore these feelings, tried to tell himself they were just gratitude or companionship or the simple relief of no longer being alone. But he had known, deep down, that it was more than that. He was falling for her, for this orc woman who chopped his firewood and mended his fences and sat across from him every evening, and the knowledge terrified him. Then winter had come in earnest, and with it a blizzard that lasted 3 days. They had been trapped in the cabin together, the world outside reduced to howling white chaos. The fire had burned constantly, but the cold had still crept in through every crack and crevice. On the second night they had both been huddled near the hearth, wrapped in every blanket Kaden owned, and Grasha had started to shiver. "Are you cold?" Kaden had asked, concerned. "I thought orcs were better with cold than humans." "We are," Grasha had said through chattering teeth. "But I am still healing. My body is not as strong as it should be." Without thinking, Kaden had moved closer and wrapped his blanket around both of them. Grasha had stiffened for a moment, then slowly relaxed against him. Her body was warm despite her shivering, radiating heat like a furnace, and Kaden had felt something shift between them in that moment. "Thank you," Grasha had murmured, and her voice had been softer than he had ever heard it. They had stayed like that through the night, sharing warmth, and when Kaden had woken in the morning he had found Grasha's head resting on his shoulder, her breathing slow and even with sleep. He had not moved, unwilling to disturb her, and when she had finally stirred and realized their position, she had pulled away quickly, her green cheeks darkening with what he was fairly certain was a blush. After that night, things had been different between them. More awkward, more charged, more full of moments where their eyes met and neither looked away quite fast enough. Grasha had started finding excuses to touch him, small things like adjusting his collar or brushing snow from his hair. Kaden had started doing the same, their hands lingering just a fraction too long when they passed tools or food. The tension had grown until it was almost unbearable, until Kaden had found himself lying awake at night thinking about her, about what it would be like to kiss her, to hold her, to tell her everything he was feeling. But fear had kept him silent. Fear of rejection, fear of the taboo nature of what he wanted, fear of what it would mean if he admitted he had fallen in love with an orc. Then spring had arrived, and with it messengers from both the human settlements and the orc clans. There was to be a peace treaty, a formal end to the raiding and violence that had plagued the frontier for generations. Lord Herrick and Chieftain Thrak were to meet, to negotiate terms, and all the outlying farms and orc camps were invited to a great feast to celebrate the new peace. Grasha had finally decided it was time to return to her people, to let them know she had survived. Kaden had helped her prepare for the journey, gathering supplies, and tried not to let her see how much the thought of her leaving hurt him. "Come with me," Grasha had said the morning she was set to depart. "Come to the feast. You live on the frontier, this peace matters for you too." "I am not good with crowds," Kaden had said, which was true but also an excuse. The real reason he did not want to go was because he could not bear to watch Grasha return to her people and disappear from his life forever. "Please," Grasha had said, and something in her voice had made him look up. "I want you there. I need you there." So he had agreed, had traveled with her to the great hall Lord Herrick had built on the border lands, had watched her reunion with her father and her clan. Chieftain Thrak had been suspicious of him at first, had demanded to know why a human man was traveling with his daughter. Grasha had explained about the life debt, about how she had been recovering her strength at his farm, and Thrak had studied Kaden with those hard orc eyes before grunting something that might have been approval. The feast had been tense from the start. Humans and orcs gathered in the same space for the first time in anyone's memory without weapons drawn. There had been speeches about peace and cooperation, about building a better future for both peoples. Kaden had sat at one of the long tables, feeling out of place and uncomfortable, wishing he had stayed home. Then Grasha had entered the hall in her ceremonial leathers, and every thought had fled from his mind. She had been beautiful, fierce and proud and strong, and when her eyes had found his across the crowded room, something had passed between them that felt like a promise or a question, or maybe both. She had walked straight to him, ignoring the whispers and stares, and sat down beside him without asking permission. "I am glad you came," she had said simply. "I am glad too," Kaden had replied, and meant it. They had eaten in companionable silence for a while, the noise of the feast swirling around them. Then Lord Herrick had stood to make another speech, this one about keeping the races separate, about maintaining proper boundaries even in peacetime, about the importance of humans marrying humans and orcs marrying orcs. It had been thinly veiled bigotry dressed up in flowery language, and Kaden had felt his jaw clench with anger. Grasha had gone very still beside him, her hands flat on the table, her knuckles pale. And then, before Kaden could process what was happening, she had turned to him and bitten his neck in full view of everyone present, which brought him to this moment, standing in the shocked silence of the feast hall, every eye on them, waiting for his response to her claim. Kaden reached up slowly and touched the place where Grasha's teeth had pressed into his skin. It did not hurt, but he could feel the slight indent of her tusks, the mark she had left on him. He looked at her fierce, vulnerable face, at the way she held herself ready for rejection, and felt something settle into place in his chest. "Yes," Kaden said clearly, his voice carrying across the hall. "I accept Grasha Stoneheart's claim. I am hers, as she says, and I would have it no other way." The hall erupted again, but this time Kaden did not care. He saw the shock and joy that flooded Grasha's face, saw her amber eyes go bright with emotion. She reached for him, and he met her halfway, pulling her into an embrace that felt like coming home. "You mean this?" Grasha whispered against his ear, her voice shaking. "You truly accept. You understand what this means." "I understand that I have been in love with you for months," Kaden said quietly, so only she could hear. "I understand that I should have told you sooner, should have been braver. I understand that I do not care what anyone else thinks as long as I can stay by your side." Grasha made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or both, and then she was kissing him, her tusks careful against his lips, her mouth warm and soft and perfect. Kaden kissed her back, his hands tangling in her braided hair, and for a long moment the rest of the world ceased to exist. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Chieftain Thrak was standing before them, his massive arms crossed over his chest. Kaden tensed, preparing for rejection or violence, but the old orc's face was thoughtful rather than angry. "You accept my daughter's claim," Thrak said, his rough voice carrying clearly. "Do you understand what you have agreed to, human? Among our people, a claiming bite is as binding as any marriage vow. You cannot take it back. You cannot change your mind later when the novelty wears off. Grasha is yours and you are hers until death separates you. This is our law." "I understand," Kaden said steadily. "And I want nothing more than to be bound to her for all my life." Thrak studied him for another long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are brave, Kaden Jamison, even if you are foolish. My daughter has chosen well, I think. You have my blessing for what it is worth." "It is worth a great deal," Kaden said, then on impulse added, "Thank you, Chieftain." Thrak's scarred face might have shown the ghost of a smile, though it was hard to tell. He turned to address the hall, his voice booming. "Grasha Stoneheart has claimed a mate according to our customs. He has accepted her claim. This is a private matter between them, and any who interfere will answer to me. The feast continues." Lord Herrick was still sputtering about decency and proper behavior, but the other humans seemed more curious than outraged now. Some of the younger orcs were pounding their fists on the tables in what Kaden learned was their equivalent of applause. The tension in the hall had shifted from shock to something more like excitement, as if everyone was suddenly aware they were witnessing something unprecedented. Grasha kept her hand locked around Kaden's, as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. Her palm was calloused from years of weapon work, warm and solid and real. "We should leave," she murmured. "Before Lord Herrick causes more trouble, come back to my clan's camp with me. We have much to discuss." Kaden nodded, and together they slipped out of the hall into the cool spring night. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the air smelled of new grass and distant pine forests. Grasha led him through the darkness with sure steps, following paths only she could see, and Kaden followed without hesitation. The orc camp was about 2 miles from the feast hall, a collection of sturdy tents and fire pits nestled in a clearing beside a fast-flowing stream. Warriors looked up as they approached, their expressions curious but not hostile. Word must have spread quickly, because no one tried to stop them or question Kaden's presence. Grasha brought him to her tent, which was larger than some of the others, befitting her status as the chieftain's daughter. Inside it was surprisingly comfortable, with thick furs spread on the ground and a small fire pit in the center that vented through a hole in the roof. Weapons and armor hung from the support poles, and personal items were stored in carved wooden chests. They stood facing each other in the firelight, suddenly awkward now that they were alone. All the things Kaden wanted to say seemed to pile up in his throat, too big and important to fit into mere words. Grasha spoke first. "I am sorry I did not warn you. I did not plan to claim you like that in front of everyone. But Lord Herrick was speaking, saying such terrible things about keeping our peoples separate, and I looked at you and realized I could not bear it. I could not bear the thought of you leaving the feast and returning to your farm and me never telling you how I feel. So I acted on instinct, the way a warrior does in battle, and now I have forced you into a situation you may not truly want." "Grasha," Kaden interrupted gently. "I meant what I said in the hall. I love you. I have loved you for months now. The only reason I did not tell you was because I was afraid. Afraid you did not feel the same way, afraid of what it would mean, afraid of everything except the truth, which is that I am happiest when I am with you." Her eyes were bright in the firelight, and Kaden saw her blinking rapidly as if fighting tears. "I love you too," she said, her voice rough with emotion. I have loved you since you held my hand through the fever, since you shared your blanket with me during the blizzard, since you looked at me like I was a person and not a monster. I did not think humans could love orcs. I did not think it was possible. But you have shown me it is possible, and now I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Kaden closed the distance between them and took her hands in his. "Then we will not be without each other. We will figure this out together. I do not know how we make this work, with your clan and my farm and all the prejudice we will face, but I know we will find a way." "Stay here tonight," Grasha said softly. "Stay with me. We can decide everything else in the morning, but tonight just stay." "Yes," Kaden said simply, and it was the easiest yes he had ever spoken. They lay down together on the furs, still fully clothed, and Grasha curled against him the way she had during the blizzard. Kaden wrapped his arms around her and breathed in her scent, feeling more at peace than he had in months. They talked quietly for hours, making plans and sharing fears and laughing about the absurdity of it all, until finally sleep claimed them both. Kaden woke to find morning sunlight filtering through the tent, and Grasha watching him with a soft expression he had never seen on her face before. "Good morning," she said, and the tenderness in her voice made his chest ache. "Good morning," he replied, reaching up to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her pointed ear. "What happens now?" "Now we negotiate," Grasha said, sitting up. "Among my people, when a warrior claims a mate, they must decide where they will live and how they will provide for each other. You have your farm, and I have my duties to the clan. We must find a way to honor both." They dressed and emerged from the tent to find Chieftain Thrak waiting for them by one of the fire pits. The old orc was roasting something that smelled delicious over the flames, and he gestured for them to sit. "You stayed the night," Thrak observed. "Good. Shows commitment. Now we talk about practical matters, because love is fine, but it does not feed anyone or keep them safe." They talked for hours, the three of them, discussing options and obstacles. Grasha could not simply abandon her clan, not when she was the chieftain's daughter and a respected warrior. Kaden could not abandon his farm, not when it was his livelihood and his home. The solution they eventually reached was not perfect, but it was workable. Grasha would split her time between the clan and the farm, spending the raiding seasons with her people, helping to defend their territories and maintain their strength, and spending the growing seasons with Kaden, helping him work the land and build their life together. It would be difficult, requiring constant travel and adjustment, but both were willing to make the sacrifice. "The clan will not all accept this," Thrak warned. "Some will see you as weak, daughter, for tying yourself to a human. Some will challenge your status as a warrior." "Let them try," Grasha said fiercely. "I have proven myself before, and I will prove myself again if I must. Kaden makes me stronger, not weaker. Anyone who cannot see that is a fool." Thrak grunted his approval. "You have your mother's fire. She would have liked this human of yours, I think." She always did have strange taste in people. It was the first time Kaden had heard mention of Grasha's mother, and he saw a flash of pain cross her face before she controlled it. He reached over and squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back gratefully. They spent the next week at the clan camp, and Kaden learned what it meant to be part of orc society. It was nothing like the savage, violent culture humans portrayed. Yes, orcs valued strength and combat prowess, but they also valued loyalty and family and honor. They had complex laws and traditions, art and music that was harsh but beautiful, a deep connection to the land they lived on. Some of the warriors were suspicious of him at first, testing him with barely veiled challenges and pointed questions. But Grasha stood by him fiercely, and slowly, grudgingly, they began to accept his presence. He helped where he could, using his farming knowledge to advise on food storage and his skilled hands to repair equipment. He learned a few words of Orcish, stumbling over the guttural sounds while Grasha tried not to laugh at his pronunciation. One evening, a young male warrior named Vark challenged Grasha to a sparring match in front of the whole clan. Kaden recognized it for what it was, a test of whether her claimed mate had weakened her fighting spirit. He wanted to intervene to stop it somehow, but Grasha had shot him a warning look that said clearly this was her battle to fight. The match had been brutal and beautiful. Grasha moved like liquid violence, her axe spinning in controlled arcs, her movements precise despite their power. Vark was skilled and strong, but Grasha was better, and within 10 minutes she had him disarmed and on his back with her boot on his chest. "Do I seem weak to you now?" she had asked, her voice carrying across the watching crowd. Vark had laughed, a booming sound of genuine approval. "No, Stoneheart, you are as strong as ever, maybe stronger. This human of yours must be good luck." After that, the challenges had stopped. Kaden was not precisely welcomed, but he was tolerated, which was more than he had hoped for. When they finally returned to his farm in late spring, Kaden felt the same sense of homecoming he always did when he saw the familiar cabin and barn and fields. But this time it was different, because Grasha was with him, and suddenly the lonely little farm felt like it could actually be a home. They fell into a new routine, working the land together. Grasha's strength meant they could accomplish in hours what would have taken Kaden days alone. They planted crops, repaired winter damage, tended the animals. In the evenings they would sit by the fire and talk, or simply enjoy each other's presence in comfortable silence. The physical side of their relationship developed slowly, carefully, both of them navigating the differences between their species with patience and humor. The first time they truly made love, it was tender and awkward and perfect, and Kaden thought his heart might burst from the overwhelming rightness of it all. But their peace was not to last unchallenged. Word of their relationship had spread through the human settlements, and not everyone was as diplomatically restrained as Lord Herrick had been at the feast. On a hot summer day, Kaden was working in the fields when he heard horses approaching. He looked up to see 5 men riding up the path to his cabin, their faces hard and their hands on their weapons. He recognized 2 of them as farmers from a settlement about 15 miles south, men he had traded with in the past. Grasha was at the stream washing clothes, and Kaden was grateful she was out of immediate sight. He set down his hoe and walked to meet the riders, trying to project calm confidence he did not entirely feel. "Kaden Jamison," the lead rider said. He was a thick-built man named Marcus Dean, known for his loud opinions and quick temper. "We have come to talk sense into you." "About what?" Kaden asked, though he knew perfectly well what they wanted. "About the orc whore you have living in your house," Marcus spat. "We heard the stories from the feast, but we did not want to believe them. Then traders came through and confirmed it. You are actually living with one of those monsters, defiling yourself with it. It is an abomination, Jamison. You are betraying your own kind." Kaden felt anger flash hot through his veins, but he kept his voice level. "Grasha is not a monster and she is not in it. She is a person and she is my mate. What I do on my own land is my business, not yours." "It is our business when your perversion threatens the peace," another rider said. "The orcs will think we condone this sort of thing. They will think we are weak, that our women are available for their taking. You are setting a dangerous precedent." "The only dangerous thing here is your ignorance," Kaden said sharply. "Grasha and I are not a threat to anyone. We are simply 2 people who love each other trying to build a life together. If that offends you, then leave. This is my land, and you are not welcome here with your hatred." We are not leaving until you see reason, Marcus said, dismounting. The other men followed suit, forming a semicircle around Kaden. Either you send that orc away, or we will make you leave this territory. We will not have your kind of filth corrupting our children and families. My kind of filth, Kaden repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. I have done nothing wrong. I have hurt no one. I work my land honestly and disturb no one. You are the ones who have ridden onto my property to threaten me. You are the ones spewing hatred and calling for violence. Who is really the threat here? Marcus's hand moved to his sword. Last chance, Jamison. Send the orc away or face the consequences. No, Kaden said simply. He saw Marcus's hand tighten on his sword hilt, saw the intention to draw it, and braced himself for a fight he knew he could not win alone against 5 armed men. Then Grasha stepped out from behind the barn, her axe in one hand and her face set in an expression of cold fury. She must have circled around when she heard the voices, positioning herself where she could intervene if needed. The human said no, Grasha said, her voice like grinding stone. He told you to leave his land. You should listen. The 5 men spun to face her, their faces registering shock and fear. Grasha in her working clothes was intimidating enough, but Grasha armed and angry was a sight to inspire terror. She looked like the warrior she was, all controlled violence and deadly purpose. The monster shows itself, Marcus said, trying to sound brave but not quite managing it. This proves our point. You are keeping a dangerous creature here, Jamison. What happens when it turns on you? When it decides to murder you in your sleep. She has had 6 months to murder me if she wanted to, Kaden pointed out. She has done nothing but help me and care for me. You are the ones threatening violence here, not her. We are protecting our people, Marcus insisted. These orcs are animals, savages. They cannot be trusted. Grasha's laugh was harsh and bitter. I am savage. I am animal. You ride onto someone's land with weapons and threats and you call me savage. You speak of peace, and then try to tear apart 2 people who have found happiness together, and you call me untrustworthy. The hypocrisy would be funny if it were not so pathetic. One of the other men, younger than Marcus and looking increasingly uncomfortable, spoke up. Maybe we should just leave them alone. They are not bothering anyone out here. What does it matter what they do? It matters because standards must be maintained, Marcus snapped. We cannot allow humans and orcs to mix. It goes against nature. Nature seems to disagree with you, Kaden said. Grasha and I are here together, and the sky has not fallen. The world continues to turn. The only ones with a problem are bigots like you who cannot stand to see people different from you finding happiness. Marcus's face was purple with rage now. You will regret your choice, Jamison. We will spread word throughout all the settlements. No one will trade with you. No one will help you if you are in trouble. You will be cast out, shunned, just like the monster you have tied yourself to. If being cast out means I do not have to associate with people like you, then I welcome it, Kaden said coldly. Now get off my land before I have Grasha remove you forcibly. For a moment he thought Marcus might actually try to fight, might do something stupid that would force violence neither Kaden nor Grasha wanted. But the other 4 men were already backing toward their horses, clearly unwilling to face an armed orc warrior no matter how much they agreed with Marcus's views. Marcus held his ground for another few seconds, then spat at Kaden's feet. You are no better than an orc yourself now, Jamison. You are dead to your own people. Then he mounted his horse and rode away, the others following quickly. Kaden and Grasha stood together, watching them disappear down the path, and Kaden felt something heavy settle in his chest. He meant what he said, Grasha said quietly. They will shun you. Your own people will turn against you because of me. I have cost you your place in human society. I never had much of a place there to begin with, Kaden said, pulling her close. And I would rather be with you and shunned than accepted and alone. Do not doubt that, Grasha, not for a moment. She held him tightly, her face buried against his shoulder. I am sorry. I did not think about all the ways this would hurt you. I only thought about not losing you. You have nothing to be sorry for, Kaden insisted. Those men chose hatred over acceptance. That is on them, not you. But Marcus's threats proved prophetic. Over the following weeks, traders who had once stopped at Kaden's farm began avoiding it. When he went to the nearest settlement to buy supplies, doors were closed in his face and people crossed the street to avoid him. Children whispered and pointed, and mothers pulled them away as if he carried some contagious disease. It hurt more than Kaden had expected, that complete rejection from his own species. He had never been particularly social, but he had not realized how much he had valued those small connections, the friendly nods and brief conversations that came with being part of a community, until they were stripped away. Grasha saw his pain and blamed herself. No matter how often he told her, he did not regret his choice. She threw herself into work on the farm with renewed intensity, as if she could somehow make up for what he had lost by working harder, being more useful. The summer wore on, hot and dry, and their crops struggled despite their best efforts. Without the ability to trade easily with other farms, they were more isolated than ever. Kaden began to worry about the coming winter, about whether they would have enough stores to survive. Then one evening in late summer, they had visitors of a different sort. Kaden looked up from weeding the garden to see Chieftain Thrak approaching, accompanied by a handful of warriors. His heart sank, wondering if this was the moment when the orc clan would reject their union as thoroughly as human society had, but Thrak's face was not angry. If anything, the old orc looked thoughtful as he surveyed the farm, taking in the neat fields and sturdy buildings. "Chieftain," Grasha said, emerging from the barn, "I did not expect you. Is something wrong?" "Wrong? No," Thrak rumbled. "I came to see how you and your human are managing. I heard troubling reports that his own people have turned against him for claiming you as mate." "It is true," Kaden admitted, "but we are managing well enough. The farm is productive and we have each other. That is what matters." Thrak studied him for a long moment, then grunted. "You are either very brave or very stupid, human, possibly both. But you have proven your commitment to my daughter, which is more than many males of any species would do. The clan has decided to extend you an offer." "An offer?" Grasha asked, surprise evident in her voice. "You are both struggling, split between two worlds and accepted by neither," Thrak said bluntly. "This is not a good way to live, always fighting for basic necessities that should be freely given. The clan has discussed it, and we are willing to accept Kaden as one of us, if he is willing. You would both live with the clan, and your skills would be valued. We have need of someone who understands farming and land management. Our food stores could be better with proper knowledge." Kaden felt his jaw drop. He had expected many things, but not this, not an invitation to join orc society completely. "I do not know what to say," he managed. "That is incredibly generous, but this farm is my home. I have put years of work into building it. And you have been cast out from human society for daring to love my daughter," Thrak said. "What is the point of keeping a home where you are not welcome among your neighbors? What kind of life is that for either of you?" It was a fair point, and Kaden could not deny it. He looked at Grasha, trying to gauge her reaction, and saw hope and fear warring in her eyes. "What do you think?" he asked her quietly. "It is your clan, your people. Would you want me there permanently?" "I want you wherever you are happy," Grasha said carefully. "If this farm makes you happy, we stay. If joining the clan makes you happy, we go. But I will not pretend that being with my people, having you accepted and valued among them would not make me very happy indeed." Kaden thought about it, really thought about it. The farm had been his dream, his escape, his proof that he could build something of his own. But it had also been lonely, isolating, a place to hide as much as a place to live. What Grasha had brought to it was not just help with the work, but companionship, love, a sense of belonging he had never found among his own people. Maybe home was not about the physical place. Maybe it was about being with the people who accepted you, valued you, loved you. Maybe home was wherever Grasha was. "Can I think about it?" Kaden asked. "This is not a small decision. I need time to consider all the implications." "Of course," Thrax said. "We are not trying to pressure you, but know that the offer stands now and in the future. You are welcome among the Stoneheart clan, Kaden Jamison, if you choose to join us." After the orcs left, Kaden and Grasha talked long into the night, weighing options and discussing fears. The truth was that staying on the farm was becoming increasingly untenable. Without the ability to trade, they were cut off from necessary supplies. If there was a bad harvest or a harsh winter, they might not survive. And there was always the possibility that someone like Marcus would return with more men and more violence. Joining the clan would mean giving up his independence, subjecting himself to orc laws and customs he did not fully understand. It would mean becoming an outsider in a different way, the only human among orcs rather than a shunned human among other humans. But it would also mean being with Grasha fully, not splitting their time and attention, not constantly traveling back and forth. It would mean being part of a community again, having people who cared if they lived or died. In the end, the decision was not as difficult as Kaden had expected. The farm was just a place, just land and buildings. What mattered was the life they could build together, and that life would be better among people who accepted them. They spent the next 2 weeks preparing to leave. Kaden sold what he could to the few traders willing to deal with him, accepting far less than the items were worth. He gave the chickens to a family in a distant settlement that had not yet heard the scandalous rumors. He packed his tools and a few precious belongings, and said goodbye to the little cabin he had called home for 7 years. It was harder than he expected, walking away from that place. He stood in the empty cabin on the last night, looking at the bare walls and cold hearth, and felt grief for the dream he was leaving behind. Grasha found him there, wrapped her arms around him from behind and rested her chin on his shoulder. "We can stay if you want," she whispered. "I will stay with you anywhere." "No," Kaden said, turning in her arms. "We are making the right choice. I just needed a moment to mourn what might have been." "We will make new dreams together," Grasha promised. "Better dreams with the clan, you will see." They left at dawn, Kaden's possessions loaded onto a cart pulled by the old mule he had decided to bring with him. The journey to the clan's summer camp took 3 days, and with each mile, Kaden felt both his anxiety and his anticipation grow. The reception when they arrived was not universally welcoming, but it was not hostile either. Orcs were practical people, and Chieftain Thrak had made his position clear. Kaden was to be treated as one of them, his skills valued, his relationship with Grasha respected. Anyone who could not abide by that was free to leave the clan. No one left. There were grumblings and sideways looks, but orcs valued clan loyalty above almost everything, and if their chieftain had decided this human was to be accepted, then accepted he would be. Kaden's first few months with the clan were difficult. He had to learn new customs, new ways of doing things, a new language. He made mistakes constantly, inadvertently offending people or breaking unspoken rules. But Grasha was always there to guide him, to explain, to defend him when necessary. Slowly, painfully, Kaden began to find his place. His farming knowledge proved valuable, and he worked with the clan's food gatherers to implement better storage and preservation techniques. He taught them about crop rotation and soil management, about how to cultivate wild plants into more productive domestic varieties. The results were tangible and immediate, and gradually, the orcs began to respect him not as Grasha's odd mate, but as someone valuable in his own right. He made friends, tentative at first but growing stronger with time. Vark, the young warrior who had challenged Grasha, became an unexpected ally, teaching Kaden basic weapon skills and defending him against the more stubborn traditionalists. An older female named Morna took him under her wing, patiently teaching him Orcish and correcting his terrible pronunciation without making him feel stupid. And through it all, Grasha was there, his constant companion and greatest supporter. Their love deepened as they built their life together, no longer split between two worlds but united in one. They had their own tent now, their own space, and slowly Kaden began to think of the clan camp as home in a way he never quite had with the farm. The first winter was hard. Kaden was not accustomed to the clan's nomadic lifestyle, the constant moving to follow game and resources. He struggled with the cold and the close quarters and the lack of privacy. But he also saw the strength of the clan's bonds, the way they cared for each other, the complete absence of the judgment and rejection he had faced among humans. By spring, he could speak functional Orcish and had earned a place of respect within the clan. He was teaching a group of young orcs about planting crops in the spring migration route, showing them how to use the land more efficiently without depleting it. He was making a difference, being useful, being valued. One evening in early spring, as he and Grasha sat by their fire watching the sunset, she turned to him with an expression he could not quite read. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice both excited and nervous. "I have been feeling strange for weeks now, tired and sick in the mornings. I spoke to Morna about it and she examined me. Kaden, I am pregnant. We are going to have a child." For a moment, Kaden could not breathe. A child. They were going to have a child, a little person who would be part human and part orc, belonging to both worlds and neither. The implications were staggering, the responsibility terrifying, the joy overwhelming. "Are you happy?" Grasha asked anxiously. "I know we did not plan this. I know it will be complicated, but I am happy, Kaden. I am so happy." "I am happy too," Kaden managed, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "I am terrified and happy and amazed and so many other things I cannot even name. We are going to be parents, Grasha. We are going to have a family." She laughed through tears, holding him just as tightly. "Yes, we are going to have a family." The news spread through the clan quickly, and to Kaden's surprise, the reception was largely positive. Children were valued among orcs, seen as the future of the clan, and a pregnancy was cause for celebration. The fact that this child would be half human was unusual, certainly, but Chieftain Thrax set the tone by declaring that his grandchild would be cherished regardless of which parent they took after. As Grasha's pregnancy progressed, Kaden felt the last of his doubts about leaving his farm fade away. This was where he belonged, here with Grasha and the clan, building a future for their child. They prepared a cradle together, Kaden carving the wood with the same care he had once used for farm tools, Grasha stitching soft furs for bedding. The birth, when it came in late autumn, was difficult and frightening. Orc births were hard enough, and a half-human child presented complications no one was quite prepared for. Kaden held Grasha's hand through hours of labor, feeling helpless and terrified as she struggled to bring their child into the world. But finally, the baby was born. A screaming, healthy infant with green-tinged skin and tiny pointed ears, but otherwise remarkably human features. She was perfect, absolutely perfect, and when the midwife placed her in Kaden's arms, he felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "Our daughter," Grasha said weakly from the bed, her face exhausted but radiant. "What should we name her?" Kaden thought about his mother, who had died when he was young, a woman who had always encouraged him to be himself even when it made him different from everyone else. "Sarah," he said softly. "Sarah Stoneheart Jamison, if you agree, a name from both our peoples." "Sarah," Grasha repeated, testing the name. "Yes, that is perfect." Little Sarah grew quickly, thriving in the loving environment of the clan. She was doted on by everyone, her mixed heritage making her special rather than outcast. She had her mother's strength and her father's curiosity, toddling around the camp getting into everything, laughing with pure joy at the slightest provocation. Watching her grow, Kaden thought about how different his life had turned out from anything he could have imagined. He had left his own people behind, had given up the dream of a quiet farm, had tied himself to someone most humans would call a monster. And yet he had never been happier, never felt more complete than he did here with Grasha and Sarah and the clan that had accepted him. 2 years after Sarah's birth, on a warm summer evening, Chieftain Thrak called a clan gathering. He was growing old now, his movements slower, and everyone knew he would not lead them much longer. When the clan had assembled, he stood before them with Grasha and Kaden at his side. "I have led the Stoneheart clan for 30 years, Thrak said, his rough voice carrying clearly. "I have tried to lead with strength and wisdom to keep our people safe and prosperous. But I am old now, and it is time to think about who will lead when I am gone. Traditionally, my son would take my place, but I have no son. I have a daughter, Grasha Stoneheart, and she has proven herself worthy of leadership time and again. She is strong, skilled, wise, and brave. She has also done something no other orc has managed. She has built a bridge between our people and the humans by choosing a human mate and making it work." The clan murmured, some in approval and some in uncertainty. Thrak raised his hand for silence. "I name Grasha as my heir," he said firmly. "When I die or can no longer lead, she will become chieftain of the Stoneheart clan. And her mate, Kaden Jamison, will stand beside her as advisor and voice of the human perspective we will need as we navigate this new era of peace. Does anyone challenge this decision?" The silence stretched. Kaden held his breath, waiting for someone to object, to say that a woman could not lead or that a human had no place in orc leadership. But the silence held, and finally, several of the senior warriors began pounding their fists against their chests in the orc gesture of approval. "Then it is decided," Thrak said with satisfaction. "My daughter will lead when I cannot, and the clan will be stronger for it." That night, lying in their tent with Sarah sleeping peacefully between them, Grasha turned to Kaden with wonder in her eyes. "Can you believe this?" she whispered. 2 years ago you were a lonely farmer and I was a wounded warrior who stumbled onto your land. Now we have a daughter and I am to be chieftain and you are part of my clan. How did we get here? You bit my neck at a feast," Kaden reminded her with a grin. "You claimed me in front of everyone and changed both our lives forever." "Best decision I ever made," Grasha said, leaning over to kiss him carefully so as not to wake their daughter. "I would do it again 1,000 times." "I would accept it 1,000 times," Kaden replied softly. "I love you, Grasha Stoneheart. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you, Kaden Jamison," Grasha said. "My mate, my partner, my heart. Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us. Thank you for being brave enough to choose love over fear." They fell asleep like that, the three of them curled together, a family built from 2 different worlds but stronger for it. Outside, the clan slept peacefully, safe and secure, while the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. The months and years that followed were not without challenges. There were still orcs who doubted Grasha's leadership or Kaden's place in the clan. There were still humans who saw their union as an abomination, who spread rumors and tried to turn the fragile peace treaty into renewed conflict. Sarah's existence as a half-orc child sparked controversy on both sides, with some seeing her as a symbol of hope and others seeing her as proof that the races should never mix. But Grasha and Kaden faced each challenge together, united in their love and their commitment to building a better future. When raiders attacked the clan, they fought side by side, protecting their people and their daughter. When crop failures threatened starvation, Kaden's knowledge helped them find alternative food sources and survive until better times. When Sarah was bullied by children who called her a half-breed, Grasha taught her to be proud of her heritage, and Kaden taught her that she belonged to all of it, both human and orc, stronger for having both bloodlines. Chieftain Thrak lived for 3 more years before dying peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family. His death was mourned deeply, but the transition of power was smooth. Grasha became Chieftain Stoneheart with Kaden at her side, and together they led the clan into a new era. Under Grasha's leadership, the Stoneheart clan became known as the most progressive of the orc clans, the ones willing to work with humans rather than fight them. They established regular trade relationships with several frontier settlements, exchanging furs and medicinal herbs for metal tools and cloth. They accepted 2 more human members over the years, people who had been cast out by their own societies for various reasons, and found acceptance among the orcs. Kaden became a respected figure in his own right, not just as the chieftain's mate, but as a valuable advisor and mediator. When disputes arose between humans and orcs, he was often called upon to help negotiate, his unique perspective allowing him to see both sides clearly. He taught young orcs about farming and land management, spreading knowledge that helped multiple clans improve their food security. Sarah grew into a strong, confident young woman who looked very much like her mother, but had her father's gentle temperament. She became a symbol of what was possible, proof that humans and orcs could not only coexist, but create something beautiful together. She learned to fight from her mother and to grow things from her father, and she grew up speaking both common and orcish fluently, comfortable in both cultures. When Sarah was 15, another half-orc child joined the clan, born to a human woman who had fallen in love with an orc warrior. Then another, and another, as more interspecies relationships formed in the wake of the peace treaty. Sarah helped care for these children, taught them to be proud of their mixed heritage, showed them they were not alone. The world was changing, slowly but surely, and Kaden and Grasha were at the heart of that change. On the 10th anniversary of the night Grasha had claimed him at the feast, Kaden and Grasha returned to the great hall where it had all begun. Lord Herrick had died years earlier, and his son, Lord Thomas, had taken over the borderlands. Thomas was younger, more open-minded, and he had invited both human and orc leaders to another feast, this one celebrating a decade of peace. Kaden and Grasha entered the hall together, their heads held high, and this time no one gasped or protested. Instead, people nodded respectfully to them, recognizing the role they had played in maintaining and strengthening the peace. Chieftain Stoneheart and her human mate had become legendary figures, proof that love could cross any divide. During the feast, Lord Thomas stood to give a speech. He talked about the success of the peace treaty, about the increased prosperity it had brought to both peoples, about the hope for continued cooperation in the future. Then he called Kaden and Grasha forward. 10 years ago in this very hall, An orc woman claimed a human man as her mate, Lord Thomas said. At the time, it was seen as scandalous, outrageous, a violation of natural law. But Grasha Stoneheart and Kaden Jamison have proven all the doubters wrong. They have built a life together, raised a beautiful daughter, and shown both our peoples that we have more in common than we have differences. They have been ambassadors for peace, teachers, leaders, and examples. It is my honor to present them with this token of appreciation from both the human settlements and the orc clans. He held out a beautifully crafted pendant, half of it made from human-worked silver and half from orc-crafted bronze. The two metals joined seamlessly together. On one side was engraved the Jamison family crest, on the other the Stoneheart clan symbol. Grasha accepted it with visible emotion, her normally fierce expression softening. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick. "Kaden and I did not set out to change the world. We only wanted to be together, to love each other, to build a family. But if our love has helped even one person see that orcs and humans are not so different after all, then we are glad. We are proof that bridges can be built, that understanding can replace fear, that love is stronger than hatred." Kaden took her hand and added, "We are grateful to everyone who has supported us over the years, who has given us a chance despite the taboos we were breaking. To the Stoneheart clan, who accepted a human into their family. To the humans who did not let prejudice blind them to the truth of who we are. And especially to each other, because none of this would have been possible if we had not been brave enough to claim what we wanted. Consequences be damned." The hall erupted into applause, both humans and orcs celebrating together. It was a far cry from the shocked silence that had greeted Grasha's claiming bite 10 years earlier, and Kaden felt moisture gathering in his eyes as he looked around at the sea of accepting faces. That night, after the feast ended and they were alone in their tent, Grasha carefully fastened the pendant around Kaden's neck. He did the same for her, their hands lingering on each other with the ease of long familiarity. "You ever regret it?" Grasha asked softly. "Accepting my claim that night, giving up your farm, your people, everything you knew?" "Never," Kaden said firmly. "Not for one single moment. You gave me more than I ever dreamed of having. A family, a purpose, a place where I truly belong. How could I regret that?" "I feel the same," Grasha said, leaning her forehead against his. "You are my heart, Kaden Jamison. You have been since the moment you showed me that not all humans are monsters, that some are capable of seeing past fear to the person beneath. I would claim you again and again, in front of any audience for all time." "Then I suppose it is a good thing I already belong to you," Kaden said with a smile. "Because after 10 years, I am not going anywhere." They kissed, long and sweet and full of the deep affection that had grown from that initial desperate attraction into something far more lasting and profound. Outside their tent, the clan slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that their chieftain and her mate would always protect them, guide them, love them. Years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new triumphs. Sarah eventually fell in love with a full-blooded orc warrior, a young male named Drak who loved her fiercely and treated her with absolute respect. Their wedding was attended by both humans and orcs, another symbol of the changing times. They gave Kaden and Grasha 3 grandchildren, all healthy and happy, all growing up in a world more tolerant and accepting than the one their grandparents had been born into. Kaden grew older, his hair going gray and then white, his movements slowing with age. Grasha aged too, though orcs lived somewhat longer than humans and aged more slowly. They watched their family grow, their clan prosper, their dream of peaceful coexistence between the races slowly become reality. On a warm summer evening, when Kaden was in his 60s and Grasha in her 50s. They sat together watching the sunset just as they had done countless times before. Sarah's children were playing nearby, their laughter bright and pure, while clan members moved about the camp preparing for the evening meal. "I have been thinking," Kaden said slowly, "about that night at the feast. About how different my life would have been if you had not been brave enough to claim me publicly. I would probably still be alone on that farm, isolated and lonely, convinced that I was meant to live apart from everyone. Instead, I have this." He gestured at the camp, at their family, at Grasha herself. "I have everything." "We have everything," Grasha corrected gently, "because we were willing to risk everything for each other. Because we chose love even when it was difficult, even when it meant giving up the familiar for the unknown. That is the lesson I hope our grandchildren learn, that love is worth fighting for always." "They are learning it," Kaden assured her. "Just by watching us, by growing up in this clan where humans and orcs live together in peace. We have given them a gift, Grasha. A better world than the one we were born into." "We have," Grasha agreed, leaning against him. "And it all started with a bite on the neck." Kaden laughed, the sound rich and full of joy. "The most important bite in history, the one that changed everything." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Around them, the clan camp hummed with life and activity, a community thriving because two people had been brave enough to love across boundaries that were supposed to be uncrossable. Kaden thought about the young farmer he had been, alone on his frontier property, dreaming of peace and purpose, but not really believing he would find either. He thought about the wounded orc woman who had collapsed at his door, setting in motion a chain of events neither of them could have predicted. He thought about all the moments between then and now, the challenges and triumphs, the fear and the courage, the doubt and the certainty. And he knew with absolute conviction that he would not change a single thing. Every hardship had been worth it, every sacrifice had led to something better. Every moment of fear had been balanced by moments of profound joy. "I love you," he said to Grasha, the words as necessary and natural as breathing. "I have loved you for 20 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left." "And I love you," Grasha replied, taking his hand in hers. "Forever and always, my mate, my partner, my heart. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes when I claimed you. Thank you for building this life with me." As darkness fell and the first stars appeared overhead, Kaden and Grasha remained seated together, surrounded by the family and community they had built through sheer determination and love. Their story had started with a shocking public claim and a brave acceptance, but it had grown into something far greater, a legacy of hope and change that would ripple out through generations to come. And somewhere in the distance, in human settlements and orc camps across the frontier, other unlikely couples were finding each other, encouraged by the example set by Chieftain Grasha Stoneheart and her human mate Kaden Jamison. The world was changing, one brave choice at a time, one forbidden love at a time, one family at a time. It had all started with a bite at a feast, with the orc woman who had said, "Now everyone knows." And everyone did know, not just that Kaden belonged to Grasha, but that love could transcend any boundary, overcome any obstacle, heal any divide. They knew because they had seen it, lived it, breathed it every day for 20 years. As Kaden closed his eyes that night, Grasha warm and solid beside him in their tent, he felt a profound sense of contentment. His life had not been easy, and the path he had chosen had cost him much. But it had given him so much more. It had given him everything that truly mattered. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, secure in the knowledge that he had lived a life full of meaning, purpose, and above all, love. The kind of love that poets wrote about, the kind that changed the world, the kind that started with a claiming bite and grew into something eternal. And in the morning, when he woke to find Grasha watching him with those fierce amber eyes full of affection, he would thank whatever gods might be listening for the day she had stumbled into his life and refused to leave. For the moment she had chosen him, claimed him, loved him despite all the reasons she should not have, for the bite that had announced to everyone that Kaden Jamison belonged to Grasha Stoneheart, and more importantly, that she belonged to him. Forever.